Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. This is the Tesla Roadster podcast series, and my co-host.
Mark Schaffner, good morning and welcome, everybody.
And the picture that we have behind us here, again, is an AI-generated image. And the prompt that I asked for was, give me a bright-colored electric blue 2008 Tesla Roadster in a commercial lobby with people admiring the car. And the reason that I picked this particular background is we're going to give you an update here shortly about the 3 China Roadsters. My preference is these cars belong in the front lobbies of gigafactories at Tesla, again, as a testament to their early adopters and their first generation cars. Don't worry about taking care of deferred maintenance. Nobody should be driving these. Just shine them up, put them in the lobby, and let visitors appreciate them. And this was the visual that I was thinking about that would be perfect for these cars. If you agree, you've got Twitter. Those of you on Twitter, tweet Elon and lobby along with the rest of us. They should buy these cars, is our opinion, and give them a prominent place in their factories rather than have them end up in some obscure basement in a collector's, large area where they keep all their cars and no one can enjoy them.
And Pete, the hood vanes are looking better.
They are, yeah.
They're in the right direction today. Looks like possibly the rear roll cage has been cut off on the passenger side, but I think your AI is learning over time.
It's getting better. And, sometimes I look at the things it renders and I say, that's not a bad design idea. Like part of that roll cage missing in the back, it makes it a little bit more convertible.
Yeah.
And, of course, we're not seeing the driver's side today. So hoping that the charge port door is in the right location and there's no gas port on this.
Yeah, but overall, I'm actually more impressed with this one than many of the others, and there have been several good ones.
It's looking good. Looks like we've got a Facebook visitor. Again, we appreciate the audience. We're streaming on a number of platforms, and if you have any questions or you just want to let us know that you're joining us, please do so. Let us know where you're from. People always like to see what part of the world you're coming in from. It looks like Sinclair Simons from Facebook says, hi, guys. Good afternoon from Bermuda, and a good morning to you out there in the West.
Well,
welcome.
Good afternoon, Sinclair. And for those of you on Instagram, by the way, if you want to get the full experience and not see just us with the green screen, feel free to go over to YouTube, and you can check the Gruber Morning Show there.
Absolutely. So we thought we would lead with the 3 Chinese Roadsters. I have an update for you again. Yesterday, late afternoon, we were finally able to vet that bidder that took it over 7 figures.
Right.
And if you go to the listing now, you'll see that there is a $2 million bid for these 3 cars. Somebody said, holy smokes over there. It's a real shot in the arm for Tesla Roadsters. And again, it's reminding the whole planet that these are special cars, that they deserve recognition, that they are iconic, and it's part of early Tesla. So at this point, the rest of the story with these cars is they are moving them from the sea containers that they've been in now for 13 years. And they're going to put them into different sea containers because they're going to be shipped to Dubai within the next week or two. There's some logistics issues, and part of that has to do with the fact that when a Tesla Roadster gets bricked, meaning that the battery goes dead, the parking pall automatically locks the rear wheels so they don't roll. And of course, these are facing front in, and what they're going to have to do in order to get them out is put dollies underneath the rear wheels. And unfortunately, in China, we don't know if they have a Harbor Freight. But they must have, because Harbor Freight is Chinese, right?
Everything that comes from Harbor Freight is Chinese. They've
right.
got to have it.
All right. So hopefully they have a Harbor Freight there locally, and they'll be able to get some dollies and put the rear wheels, at least make them movable. Another issue is that the keys typically for these cars that are being stored at the docks are kept in an office somewhere, a dock manager's office. And the problem that we're having now is that particular dock manager passed some time ago, and no one can find the keys to the cars. Now, there's a different problem in that the front wheels are normally unlocked
Right.
and they roll.
Right.
But if you don't have the key and you can't get inside and you can't unlock the steering column, then if there's any turn in the wheels, the front wheels, as they're bringing them out, it's going to want to go into the side of the sea container. So at this point, they're taking some measurements to make sure that the wheels are straight enough, the front wheels. Otherwise, again, Harbor Freight, wheel dollies, it's going to have 4 dollies on them.
Right. And just as a reminder to everybody out here, we had feedback a couple weeks ago that the sea containers that these guys were in are not seaworthy. So they have to be transferred to new sea containers in order to be able to get shipped over to Dubai. And they're going to Dubai for what reason again?
Well, the difficulty of having anyone viewing, well, 2 things. There's a difficulty in a permit process that's at the dock, and it takes about 24 to 48 hours to get the approvals for someone to go see the cars. So we're finding that, people that are prospective bidders, first they have a 20-hour flight, then they have to hang out for, 2 days, up to 2
Right.
days. And by taking them to Dubai, there's a free zone area there, and people can come and go as they please then.
Okay, and then we're not going to have any potential questions or arguments or anything about tariffs because, of course, there are no tariffs between Dubai and the United States.
Exactly. So that will also get completely cleared up once they're out of there. And then the other issue that they're running into is people at the dock are beginning to realize the value of these cars, and no one wants to touch them and incur any type of damage. We're talking about forklifts, rigging equipment, and all
Oh,
that.
sure.
So the sellers are having a difficult time getting these properly removed from the sea containers. And the other thing that puzzles me is they've been collecting, the people that own the sea containers have been collecting revenue for the last 13 years, and now they want those out of there and they want to stop that income stream. So they need to go into different sea containers, and they figured while they're doing that, let's take them to Dubai, free zone, and they can sell easier from that location.
Sure.
Sorry, can you pull your mic a little closer?
Sure. Okay. So that's part of what's going on. The keys, by the way, Tesla has been helpful, and they are also fully aware of the importance of these cars. And according to the sellers, they're getting real good responses from Tesla, helping them get this key problem solved. So even if they don't have the keys at this point, though, the cars should be able to be moved out of the sea containers, especially if they have 4 dollies. And then from there, they'll go into a new set of sea containers. The trip on the water to Dubai from where they are in China is about 18 to 20 days. We've got about a week or 2 of processing to get the cars moved. So we're looking at another month and a half at least before they end up in Dubai. Let's see if there's anything else here. Oh, questions. Someone asked, is there a main battery pack in these cars? Well, at this point, we did not get a FaceTime session with these cars yet.
Correct.
But there is nothing that indicates that these have been taken apart in any way. And the assumption is that these are fully populated with all of the hardware that's supposed to be in them, those 3. VIN 1185, which we're still looking for the chassis, has parts that were taken off the car, and that's what was in those crates
Right.
that they located.
And I think the fact that these cars, nobody knew what kind of value those cars were going to have. And up until as recently as just a couple of years ago, a Tesla Roadster would have sold used for, $30,000 or $40,000. And if you have a $30,000 battery pack, you're like, okay, whatever. So it may be that the extreme escalation in value on these Roadsters is recent. That will actually help the seller in this case It's not like you have an original 1965 or 1964 and a half Mustang that everybody knows and has known for years is super valuable. These are cars that have only recently become valuable. That means there's a higher chance that these cars are going to be 100% intact, that they're going to be okay. And that kind of answers Niles' question from the Biogenous Genome Institute that he asked here, where he's asking, can you be sure the container roadsters are 100% intact, not stripped, ever been worked on, or failing expectations somehow? It's going to be hard to make sure, but there's pretty good evidence in the fact that they are still strapped down to those sea containers with what appear to be 13-year-old straps that haven't been touched, that there are parts from 1185 just kind of sitting in a crate near the sea containers, and the fact that these cars are only recently becoming valuable like this all lend to the idea that these will probably be intact roadsters.
And let's remember, this story is, of course, still evolving. We found out last week that the company that purchased these cars was a Chinese EV manufacturer that has since gone bankrupt. And it would make sense that they would be interested, if they're going to reverse engineer,
Right.
they would start with one which would be 1185, since that one is partially missing. And the things that they would most likely be interested in is not going to be the Lotus stuff, the control arms and the suspension components and the shocks and,
Right.
the fenders and body panels. They're going to be interested in the electronics. And that appears to be what is missing with VIN 1185 at this point. And it would seem to make sense that if they have one set, a battery pack and a power electronics module, and all the electronic modules out of one car, why would they need 4 more or 3 more,
Right, unless they were to go to do destructive testing on the one and had three more in reserve to basically as spares in case the destructive testing didn't produce the results that they want. Then they could have 3 more already handy and available. In this case, they went bankrupt before they could get to any of the other 3, or so it appears.
And in case anybody is asking, why would they want old tech Tesla Roadster stuff? Remember, this was 2010, before the Model S came out,
Yes.
before the world was switching over to electric vehicles. So at that point in time, the Tesla Roadster was, high tech. It was cutting edge technology.
It was about as high tech as you could get, and they had been around long enough to prove out the concept at that point in time that an electric vehicle with a lithium-ion battery was a viable vehicle, and not something like a souped-up golf cart or something like that.
So stay tuned, folks. The story is still evolving. I'm sure it's going to be an adventure getting them to Dubai, and then once we get keys, we'll be able to open them up. The trunks will come open, the insides will come open, and we'll be able to do a lot more than what we're doing right now. It looks like George is joining us. Watch Rich Rebill's channel. Good morning, guys. Good morning to you as well. Instagram. Albert Tomorales 583-6711. Greetings from Panama.
Well, good morning or good afternoon to you.
Central America. There we go. And it looks like Bruno M. Matos is joining us from Instagram. Good afternoon, my friends, from Toronto, Canada.
And good afternoon. And then DK Chowan on LinkedIn is telling us best of luck on these roadsters.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
Fingers crossed. We're doing the same thing. On TikTok, Dane Absil 222. Hopefully Elon buys it while he's there in China right now.
That would be a good idea.
We love that idea.
Do you think Elon will be patient enough to wait 2 days to get a permit to go see them, though?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so either.
Maybe he tells his assistant, though, hey, go get those.
Yeah, he'll leave someone there.
Yes.
Very cool. And then watch Rich Rebill's channel. George is what we call him, because he has actually identified himself through an email. We'll just go George from now on, because I think Rich Rebill's is getting a lot of traffic on our podcasts.
Oh,
free
yes.
promo.
Free promo, yes. Rich, you got to do the same for us, though, or we're going to develop aliases and join your chats.
That's right. That's right.
Now, Pete,
Yeah.
Did you mention the other day that this new process of the Roadsters going to Dubai and all that? Does that mean I know we want to see them here at our shop? Does that mean we might not see them?
It all depends on the final buyer. There are a lot of bidders that are interested in having them come to our shop for a technical analysis. And, even if they're going to store them somewhere, certification, that type of thing. So, yeah, there is still a chance. But at this point, we've got an international audience that is bidding on these, and who knows where it'll go from here.
We need
Yeah.
that video content.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. I hear a plug now. You guys want me to fly you where?
Yeah, we'll just go hang out in Dubai for a little bit.
There you go. Yeah. Look at, they're all
Little
perking up
bit.
over there.
Little bit, long bit, whatever you're feeling, Pete.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, George says maybe they'll find Jimmy Hoffa if they keep looking in other sea containers. Good point.
Yeah, you never know, George. You never know. On LinkedIn, Iñaki Calvo Ponte. If you like motorbike electric, Tesla, he is a distributor in Europe.
Okay. All right. Well, any of you that are interested in bidding on these, ev@gruber.com. The bids get posted as soon as we get them. We will vet you first, and then we will post that bid, and we'll see how that climbs from here.
Definitely, I'm interested to see. I'm how this goes. I don't think we have stopped receiving bids at this point. I still think there are more to come. We've had enough people express interest that have said, well, how much is the next bid, so that we know how much we need to bid.
And of course, you could have the global distinction of being able to outbid Elon if he throws in a bid.
I was
Remember,
just about to say that.
Yes.
Pete, what we could do with the seller to try and get Elon's attention is we could set an Elon-only reserve,
Oh, there you go. Okay.
where if he wants to buy him, this is the price, he can come buy him.
That's a great idea.
That's a
actually,
great
guys.
idea.
Yeah. So, speaking of cars that are on our Roadster listing site, on our website, it's called Roadsters for Sale, I think, or Roadster
Yeah, just
Matchmaking.
Roadsters
Yeah.
for sale. It's our Roadster matchmaking service.
We're approached by a seller of another type of vehicle, which normally we have been turning away. I want to sell my Chevy. I want to sell my my Model X Tesla. This particular one, though, caught us by surprise, and it piqued our interest. And it is a Lotus hybrid vehicle, the only one made. And it's the model number, in case you're interested doing research on this. It's a fascinating story. It's the 414E. And this particular seller was able to buy this car, a one-of from Lotus, and he has been, I think he's been an owner. Richard's very intimately familiar with this because he's been doing the video on this one. How long has David owned this car?
David has owned the car, I believe, since 2020. I might be
Okay.
incorrect on that number because the car was bought back in 2017. That owner had it for 5 years and then sold it.
So the first time that it was sold by Lotus was 2017, right?
2016, 2017.
Okay, all
Okay.
right. And there's an interesting backstory with this, and I suggest that you guys watch the video because it's coming out within the next day or two. The whole world was beginning to light up with EV adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Lotus had just gotten done with building the Tesla Roadster with Tesla. It was truly a collaboration.
Right,
The first
right.
cars were even built there. So they had some talent within the company that was familiar with electric cars. Well, in the meantime, the UK government is watching this rapid EV adoption, and they want to be part of it. So they approached a number of car manufacturers and said, we've got some grant money for you guys if you guys are willing to get into the EV business. Well, anyway, Lotus took advantage of that. And it's kind of murky, but the projected cost and grant is in the neighborhood of 23 million pounds, which if you Google it is $28.5 million for one car, mind you. So this is a very unique car. And what we're going to be doing in this video is We're going to show the vehicle. Some of the
Got a picture of it.
oh, you do? Yeah, let's bring it up. Beautiful. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Lotus had a copper color, and this takes me into another story. VIN 501, which was the first, no, I'm sorry, the 500, the last 1.5 Tesla Roadster. There were
Okay.
two series, 1.5 and 2.x.
Mm-hmm.
Just sold on the matchmaking site, I think, in fall of last year. It took us 9 months to sell it.
Right.
It was a salvage car, and it was the ridiculous reason why it got salvaged. The owner was driving down an LA freeway, and a pipe fell off of a landscaping trailer ahead of him. He tried to weave and dodge and get out of its way, but it went under the car, and it put a hole in the floorboard right by his foot, actually, on the driver's side, about the size of a softball. Well, he took it to Tesla at the time, and they deemed it as being totaled because they felt that the entire frame will need to be replaced on the car, the chassis, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he ended up buying it back, and he took it down to a local sheet metal shop. They took a piece of 8x8 aluminum. They pop riveted that over the hole, pounded the top flat, put the carpet back over it, and the car is just fine. But it now had a
A
salvage
salvage
stigma.
title.
Right. It took 9 months to sell this car. The reason I'm telling you all this is that car, I believe, had that same copper color as this Lotus that you looked at, that VIN or that 414E Lotus Hybrid. So within the next couple of days, we're going to be releasing a video. This car will be for sale. It's currently located in the UK. And if any of you are into collecting cars and you want something that is one of, there are no others, they were planning on building more, and that'll come out in the video, you can have this car. And so keep an eye on our videos, and we'll post that. When do you think, Richard?
I'm gonna shoot to have it done today,
Today. Okay.
hopefully. Yeah, everything. I've got all the beer. I've got everything all lined up, ready to go. It's just a matter of putting it into the video. But you guys aren't gonna want to miss this one. It's gonna tell the story from beginning to end with this car, and it is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it's definitely going to be an iconic car in the evolution of the EV adoption.
And the lines on that car look so much like a Tesla Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the casual observer, they might at first glance think that it is a Roadster actually, and then you don't have the hood veins, and the styling is a little bit
Right.
different.
So for those of you used to going to our listing, you're going to see a non-Tesla for the first time out in the Roadster for sale section. So it looks like we've got some questions. Stephen Rose, welcome back from YouTube. He says he's from San Juan Capistrano, California. He loves our program and shorts. Very informative. Well, thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us again. Yeah.
And then Iñaki Calvo-Ponte says perfect.
It's actually perfecto.
Perfecto.
So he must be in another part of the world. If you want to, later on, Inaki, let us know where you're coming in from. And we'll let the viewers know as well. All right. So we've got some other news items here. There was a article that came out last week, and it showed 3 Roadsters, or 6 Roadsters actually, in Owings Mills, Maryland. If you guys can bring up that folder, we've got 4 pictures I'd like to pop up here to show the audience what the story is about. And it's not the first time that a Tesla owner has taken their vehicle to a service center, and because the waiting room is boring, they've walked around the back and saw a bunch of Roadsters sitting there.
Right.
Long Beach has that. Owings Mills has that. And what this is about is a couple of things. You can't assume because Roadsters are out in back of the building that they are parts cars. Some of these were customer cars, like in the case of Long Beach.
Right.
And the reason we knew that is the person that took pictures of them was taking pictures of the VINs as well. And as I looked those up, I realized, my God, some of them are our customers, right? One of them that we had sent to the Tesla Service Center for an anemic battery pack. These particular cars here do not have VINs, at least that we're aware of, but the the magazine was able to interview one of the technicians at this Owings Mills, Maryland service center, and they corroborated the fact that these cars were actually purchased as parts cars. So at this point, we probably should talk about why Tesla is doing this. About 4 years ago or so, 2019, I believe it was, Tesla was buying parts from us, and we were running out. We used to be able to buy totaled salvage title Tesla Roadsters at auctions and use them as parts cars.
Right, and we would pay what? Somewhere between $9,000 or $10,000 and about $15,000 for 'em.
Not quite that low, I wish, but usually I think the lowest one we bought was around 11 or 12.
Okay.
But typically it was $17,000 to $23,000 for a completely crashed Tesla Roadster.
Okay.
And these were typically cars that could not be put back on the road or should not because they had frame damage, you know. Now, granted, you can fix anything. You can Band-Aid it, but is it going to be safe after you get done with it? So these were cars that were truly parts cars, and we began to sell some of these parts to Tesla and realized fairly quickly that the demand is greater than the supply. So at that time, Tesla decided they're going to have us buy cars at auction. In fact, that was one of the reasons we flew to Fremont, was to lay the groundwork for that.
Right.
And we would buy the cars, we would take them apart, we would certify and test the parts that were coming off them, and basically become part of their supply chain.
Right.
At the last minute, they decided, you know what, we can do this ourselves. So they decided to purchase them themselves, and not necessarily auction cars at this point, because the Model 3 was coming out, and people wanted to upgrade, they felt. So they offered a number of Roadster buyers the option to trade in their Roadster, which many customers did. And they were paying industry scale at the time, around $40,000 or so for these cars. And that's what began to fill their shelves again with parts. Now, during this time, remember that this is like 10 years after the Roadster came out, actually 12 years or more.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. Everyone was concerned, will Tesla continue to support the Roadster? By them spending millions to buy back Tesla Roadsters, again, convinced people, yeah, it looks like they're going to hang in there. They're going to continue to support us. They're going to continue to provide parts. Now, you might ask, well, what happened to all the parts that they had? Well, they threw away some parts in the early days, not realizing that, the future was going to be demand on parts like this. They saved some things, but not everything.
Right.
The other part was that vendors that they were using went bankrupt, went out of business. They were typically smaller vendors, not the big ones that have been around for many decades, well into the last century. But these were the vendors that would allow them to purchase 2,400 of something. And remember, that's a production, or that's a prototype run.
Right.
And typically, vendors are going to have a high minimum order quantity, and 2,400 doesn't quite fit into the large vendors' vocabulary.
I think we talked at one point about they wouldn't go with A-list vendors because both of cost and MOQs. They probably wouldn't go with B-list vendors because they still have minimum order quantities that were too high. They were going with, like the Taiwanese barbecue manufacturer.
Right, making the battery
they
enclosures,
were willing to do a small run and do the high temperature paint and make the PEM cases.
Right.
But what barbecue manufacturer is going to say in 2012, we're going to keep all of our molds and we're going to keep everything just in case in 10 years they come back and want more.
And, there were miscalculations with the Roadster, which everyone, including Elon, freely admit. The original intent to use a Lotus Elise and simply electrify it never panned out.
Right.
And the primary reason was by the time they get done building a 1,000-pound battery pack to squeeze into that Lotus Elise, they realized that there were structural changes that needed to be made. The body panels all had to be recreated. And now they were forced to go out and try to find vendors that will build, again, 2,400 of something.
Yeah, and it's not like we're talking about, hey, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Vendor, and I'm going to go order 2,000 body panels. 2,000 front fenders. No, these were built out over the course of 3 years. So, hey, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Vendor, and I need 150 front fenders. Can you put together the molding and give me 150 front fenders? And they're like, none, not on your life.
And then, of course, dies and molds are expensive.
Right.
And if you can amortize that over a large, MOQ, then it makes sense for that vendor to bury that cost into the overall purchase. So anyway, a number of these companies went out of business. Sotira, for example, in France, was making body panels. They folded their doors, 10 years ago or more. So today, there's very little, very few vendors are still available for the Tesla Roadster that were making them back in the day. And one of the things that we do with Tesla is we help them revive some of these old vendors when we can find them, or we recreate parts like 3D print parts.
Right.
Sometimes it's to avoid a high MOQ, we will both buy parts like the fans that we purchased. And between our volume and theirs, Tesla's volume, we were able to meet that minimum order quantity.
Right.
So that's the fundamental reason that Tesla began to buy back Roadsters, was that parts were just very difficult to get for the Roadster. The second reason was it's a wonderful training tool, because when you take something apart, you learn how it went together. And so at these service centers, these technicians taking parts off the cars is an educational experience for them. So there's a double benefit there. So what you're seeing here with this Owing Mills, have we had the picture of the 6 cars up, guys?
Yeah, it was.
All right. Let's put up the interior, because this is what's most disconcerting to the Roadster faithful. These cars are typically sitting outside. Yes, the leather seats are going to get snow and rain on them. The interior portions are going to get compromised. And the way that this article described a quote from a technician that they were able to talk to outside Owings Mills, Maryland. Let me give you the analogy because it was quite fitting, since my wife and I shop at Costco. They said it's like a Costco rotisserie chicken. You eat what you like the first day, then you put it in the fridge, and you keep picking away at it until there's nothing left but bones and scraps. So that's basically what's happening with these Roadsters. This particular Roadster, I believe, has a top on it, so I don't think that the interior is going to get as compromised. And one would hope that if the top is removed, sold, or put in inventory, that the rest of the interior pieces, which are quite valuable, will also be removed, and it'll be stripped down to the same thing that you do with your Costco rotisserie chicken, down to bones.
Yeah, and the point that you make.
Oh, we've got another picture coming up.
Yes. The point that you're making about the Tesla Roadster technicians learning as they take them apart is such a good point, because it does mention in the article too that the reason there aren't a lot of original Tesla Roadster technicians there is because they all retired.
They all retired. And
many of these Tesla Roadster technicians, according to the article, are people who received stock options as part of their compensation to come across over to Tesla. Then when the Tesla stock skyrocketed, they were instantly millionaires. And if a car mechanic suddenly becomes a millionaire overnight, I could see a car mechanic wanting to leave.
Yeah.
And just retire.
And the original stock options that were offered to any employee actually was 40,000 shares. And that was before all the splits took place. So if you do the math, extrapolate that back to $22,008 and 2010
oh my goodness.
Valuation, we did the math. It's like over $200 million. So, yeah, a lot of the original Tesla people are now what are called Tesla-naires, and they don't need to go to work anymore.
Yeah, I think if I had $200 million sitting in the bank or in stocks, I would sell off enough of the stocks to fund the rest of my life and go have the rest of my life.
Now, see, this is our CFO talking, and he's making me nervous. So I'm not going to give him any stock options soon here, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. So, but yeah, that's the story with these Tesla Roadsters that sometimes will be visible outside a service center. They are being taken apart for parts. The benefit to the Roadster community is that we're back in parts, oftentimes parts that you can't get anymore. And the article also says they have an analogy here: kill the weak, save the strong. Now, you might ask, why would someone part with their Tesla Roadster? Because the difference between a Model 3 and a Tesla Roadster, in my opinion, is light years. One is a four-door grocery getter sedan, and yeah, it's comfortable, it's fun, it's fast, it's it's quiet, it's got great cooling. But if you're a car person, you're going to enjoy a sports car. You're going to enjoy the top down. You're going to enjoy the two-seater aspect, low to the ground, 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds. So the question is, why would somebody trade in their Tesla Roadster? Well, there were a few reasons for that. One of them is a failed Tesla Roadster at a service center oftentimes was the result of a bricked Roadster. And Roadster speak, that means that the battery's dead. Well, if they didn't know about us, we recover battery packs, we fix them. The solution at the service center is a $30,000 pack replacement. Well, like Mark pointed out, back in the day when these cars weren't worth over 30, 40, or 50,000, it was difficult to justify a $30,000 expense.
Oh, absolutely. You know, a lot of these buybacks took place between 2017 and late 2018. We were buying brand new roadworthy roadsters, or not brand new, but we were buying roadworthy roadsters, not salvage title, for 35 to 45,000, and we were buying the crashed roadsters from the auction sites, as you said, for 12 to 17,000, sometimes around 20,000. So a $30,000 battery going into a $35,000 car just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
And you're not even talking about the PIM yet.
And this was probably before we had our Roadster matchmaking site. Roadsters, even broken ones, bricked ones, will sell. And we'll talk about that later. There's a cool story about a bricked Roadster that sold. So the other thing is, if it's not the battery, you've got a power electronics module in there. That used to be $10,000. Then they dropped it to $8,500, and I think it's still in that neighborhood. Which that may be too expensive for some people. And then the final thing was, a Roadster is a two-seater sports car that can be difficult to get in and out of. I have no issues because I'm 5'8", but you get beyond 6 feet, it's a tough car to get in and out of. And if you have any back problems, as we age, sometimes that happens. We've had Roadster owners sell their cars because they can't do the Roadster wiggle anymore, which is what you need to do to get inside the cabin. There's a door sill that sits up quite a ways. It's a Lotus Elise leftover. So there are a number of reasons why people would have sold their Roadster. Today, I believe that Roadster owners are a bit more savvy. They are more interested in the collector aspect of a Tesla Roadster, and the auctions actually are blossoming with Roadster sales these days, and our Roadster matchmaking site is busier than ever. I think we sell more Roadsters than anybody on the planet on that Roadster matchmaking site, if you take a look at the auctions and their volume. So anyway, that's a story on the roadside mystery with these with this article that showed a bunch of Roadsters outside the Roadster Service Center.
Now we have a couple of questions and comments. First, George from the Watchridge Rebuilds channel, and we're going to start calling you George. He says, "I forget, did the original Roadsters get free lifetime charging?"
No, it was actually before when the Roadster came out. The way to get a charge was at your home. And if you weren't at home, you actually could buy a whole batch of adapter cables and go to KOA campgrounds. This was before there were destination chargers because EVs weren't on the road yet. So yeah, no supercharging for a Roadster. It was not built for that. And no free lifetime charging as well. You had to pay for it at your house.
And so he also continues and says, "Sorry about using my name, by the way. Don't be sorry. I just love your show. I learned so much from you guys, and using George is fine. So thank you. And again, don't be sorry. We're glad to be able to have you on the show. Dave from YouTube says amazing humor and information.
Well, thank you. Yes.
And then Niles from the Bion Danish Genome Institute asks, how many Roadsters roughly are still running?
You know, the simple answer to that is if you go to our website, there's a little census icon that's in the upper right-hand corner. And we made this available to the Roadster community a couple of years ago because everybody asked those questions. How many Lightning Green Roadsters were there? How many are still left? How many are in existence? What countries are they in? What this census program will allow you to do, it has the ability to search on any of the columns. And you can see up at the top there are 1,612 accounted for Roadsters with VINs. But the unaccounted are Roadsters that we became aware of that we don't have VINs for yet, 572. So you can see there are about 2,100 Roadsters that are out there floating around out of 2,400, which is not bad.
That's pretty good, actually, yeah.
And looks like...
So I think we're caught up on the questions
All
at
right.
this point.
So why don't we jump to the brick Roadster that's sold so that you can actually get money for a Roadster that's not functioning?
Oh, yes. That was one that was on the matchmaking service not too long ago, if I remember right.
It was. An interesting story there, too. We get, of course, calls all the time. Tell me about this Roadster. Tell me about that one. And I had a gentleman call me in Columbus, Georgia. His name is Alan Woodall, and he owns a lunchbox museum. Now, you wouldn't think that people would be interested in going to see lunchboxes, but it turns out there's quite an interesting history there, going well into the last century. Interesting side note, lunchboxes were metal until 1970-something, and I knew this story, but I'm just going to paraphrase at this point. And a kid got hit over the head with a metal lunchbox, and some teachers at a very liberal grammar school got a law passed that you could no longer have metal lunchboxes.
Oh, my gosh.
And everything had to be plastic from then. Now, remember, in the 70s, plastic was already being, it was already available.
Yeah,
it was a step above Bakelite, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, the museum has a bunch of metal lunchboxes, which are now no longer being made, apparently. And what Alan has done, by the way, bless his heart, he's in his 90s. He's passionate as ever about these lunchboxes. He loves what he does. He's an inspiration to those of us that are also getting older, at least me.
Oh, yes.
And the next picture, I think, is a picture of Alan. It's picture number 2.
That's a great picture of his museum.
Mm-hmm. We're going to bring up Alan here in a moment. There he is. So he called me up and he said, you know, I've got my lunchbox museum. It's a lot of fun, but I love cars. And I want to start an electric car museum. What do you have that I can put in the museum? So he looked at the Tesla Roadsters and he said, wow, these are all $100,000 to $130,000. I don't quite have a budget for that, but here's one for $70,000. Why is that $70,000? I said, well, it doesn't run. He says, well, I don't want a car that doesn't run. So I talked him through it. I said, well, what are you going to do with it? He said, well, it's going to be in my museum. I said, are you ever going to drive it? He says, no, it's going to sit up there and look pretty. I said, well, this is your car, isn't it? And he agreed.
Yeah.
And we sold that car right then and there. And well, when I say sold, I mean we got the owner in touch with
we got
with the
him
seller.
got him in touch. And
so today, that Tesla Roadster is sitting in Alan's museum. And picture number 5, guys, if you guys can bring that up. Oh, before we go there. So here's some of these displays for the lunchboxes. What do we got? 1967,
1967 and 1954 Superman and 1979 or 1978 Superman.
1935.
1935. Okay, was that Superman?
Mickey Mouse.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Very cool. So he gets a lot of visitors every day. Oh, the Lone Ranger's down there. I think he had Howdy Doody on one of the ones that I saw.
There's the Beatles down there.
Hey, there you go. Oh, my God. Look at that.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd be proud to carry one of those lunch boxes in grammar school, wouldn't you?
I would be too, man.
Yeah. So anyway, if we go to picture number 5, there's a picture of Alan with some of his staff. And what you'll see behind him is a very special Tesla Roadster. It's the one that was bricked, that's sold on our site. But it turns out that this Roadster has a very interesting pedigree. It is a radiant red that's sitting behind his staff there. You can see part of it there. And at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Mark, and you can tell us the pedigree and the history on this Roadster, right?
Yes, this particular Roadster actually is the world record holder for distance. This Roadster in 2009 participated as part of Australia's Global Green Challenge. Simon Hackett and Emilius Prigalskis were the co-drivers of this particular Roadster. And at the beginning of the race, they provided a security seal. So they sealed up the charge port. They had cars driving with them to document it. And the whole idea behind it is that it was part of Australia's Global Green Challenge. So they wanted to prove out the concept that an electric car could drive a long distance. And the Roadster was one of the few or the only real viable electric car at the time. So this is from Simon himself on the article that we read. Emilius and I have decades of experience flying gliders competitively, and we applied the same energy conservation techniques to our driving, with significant results. The car had about 3 miles of range left when the drive was completed. We traveled 501 kilometers on a single charge. That is 313 miles. Let that sink in for a minute. Just let it sink in.
Well, we should probably tell the audience that aren't familiar with Roadsters, what's the average range that you can get out of a legacy Roadster without the upgrade battery pack?
Yeah, because we're talking about a 57 kilowatt battery pack that typically on these Roadsters in range mode at best would be about 190 miles of range. When you're not in range mode, it was typically more like about 170 miles of range, maybe even as little as 160. So the fact that these guys got 313 miles on a single charge. And so he continued and said the security seal was applied to the charge port door when we started the journey. As this is being done, as part of the Global Green Challenge, we have a full set of official verifiers who will attest to the results and to achieving the outcome. We were followed along the journey by our support crew and a documentary film crew. So they even have it on film. That is a really cool story about this particular Red Roadster.
There are some areas in Australia, of course, that are fairly level and flat.
Yes.
I don't think they would have been able to do this in a mountainous area. It would have eaten up too much energy. The other thing that I remember from this early on was it was slow. They did not do 60, 70 miles an hour on the open straightaways. I believe they kept it just under 40 miles an hour, just above 30 miles an hour. So in order to get that kind of distance.
Right. And anyone who is a regular electric car driver can attest, just like the hybrid cars, it's that slower city driving, that coasting and stopping at a stoplight and using your regenerative braking and stuff like that really helps. And I think that's part of the techniques that they did is they would go up the hill fairly slowly, using as little energy as possible on rolling hills, and whenever there was any kind of downhill, they would keep their speed low and let the regenerative braking
charge the
continue
battery.
to charge the battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even in a flat terrain, it's not truly flat. There's always gentle risers or falls.
So how fitting for this record-breaking Roadster to end up in a museum in Alan Woodhall's EV Museum in Columbus, Georgia. And any of you that are in that neck of the woods or visiting or going through there, I highly recommend visiting Alan Woodhall. He is a inspirational, passionate type individual, and I think you will enjoy meeting him.
And boy, just still going strong in his 90s. That is truly an inspiration.
Very much so, yeah. All right. So we probably need to get into some other news items here. Haggerty in 2022 listed the Tesla Roadster as one of the vehicles on their bull market list. Bull, of course, being from the stock market. These are cars that they feel are collectible, going collectible. And they did 5 takeaways in 2022. I found these interesting. The first one, which doesn't apply to EVs, but it is interesting nonetheless, they said right-hand drive, especially when paired with a stick shift, is no longer the deal killer that it once was in collectible cars.
Sure, sure.
By the way, I believe this Roadster that we just got done talking about, it's VIN 186, by the way,
Uh-huh.
is a right-hand drive vehicle. It would have had to have been if it was sold in Australia, which also I think would make it unique.
That would make it unique. I don't know. That's a good question. I know that there are a small number of Roadsters that are right-hand drive.
Right. Well, Alan, if you're watching, and I did invite him to join us in the podcast, send me an email after we're done, and let us know if that's a right-hand drive Roadster that you have in your museum there. Number 2, they said, it's time to put to bed the notion that people only want cars that were hot when they were young.
I have a story on this particular one because
Go
I
for it.
saw the Haggerty list, and they have their top 10 cars on their bull market list. It included the 1985 to 1995 Suzuki Samurai.
Really? Okay.
So that is absolutely not a hot car. Here in Phoenix, I can remember, you go back and we had it's raining in Phoenix, which means it's pouring. It's 1.5 inches an hour or something like that, or it's dry. 320 days of the year it's dry. The other 40 days is when you get your rain. And I can remember driving in a Suzuki Samurai with a classmate from college. Dunlap Avenue in north central Phoenix was closed because it was flooded over, and we were in our lifted Suzuki Samurai driving down, kind of laughing at the people that were stranded in their cars.
How cool is that?
But yeah, that's another one of those cars to this idea that was not a hot car. It is all of a 1.3 liter engine that could produce at least 68 horsepower.
Amazing. Yes. And, this actually resonates with me because when I was in high school, 60s, there were, the muscle car era was in full bloom. And it wasn't until years later that one of my sons, needing a high school car, we found one at a garage sale. And it was a 72 Dodge Dart with a 360 engine. It's a small block, but it's the biggest small block.
Yeah, okay.
It had headers, and it was painted black, rattle can black. It wasn't anything special to look at, but it made a lot of noise, and it was fast. And I talked him into getting that instead of a rice burner.
Okay.
He did, and it ignited that passion in him. So he enjoyed that car all through high school. But what it also did was it reignited my interest in muscle cars. The next thing you know, I bought a 69 Plymouth Roadrunner, restored it with a 4-speed. Then I bought a 70 Roadrunner with automatic, restored it and sold it, flipped it to buy a 68 Dodge Charger, which I then rebuilt. And the final Mopar experience was the ultimate, at that time at least, a 2008 ACR Dodge Viper, which was the ultimate Mopar.
Yes.
And my plan there was, seeing that some of these old cars would eventually be worth millions, I figured, well, they had to be rare. We were looking at the 71 Plymouth Hemi Cuda convertible. They built 11 of those, and one sold in town here for $3.5 million at one point in time. So anyway, my thinking with the Viper was it's limited edition. It has the largest naturally aspirated production engine made. It was like 8.3 liters or something
Right.
like that, 502 cubic inches. And it was limited edition. There were only a few thousand of them made, a couple, 3,000 or so.
Correct. Yeah.
But anyway, so that does resonate with me, but it looks like it's a different day and age now, because the third Haggerty condition or takeaway is square is now cool. Do you remember Huey Lewis's
I do.
tune? Yeah, it's hip to be square. All right.
Yeah.
And Uber utility holds as much appeal to younger buyers as sexy lines and sporty handling had for boomers. 4, Europe still rules in values with 50% of our list coming from across the Atlantic. Again, this is the Haggerty takeaway. And then the final one was number 5, and this is where they talk about the Roadster. They say the Tesla is hard to classify. Is it cool because it's cool, or because it represents the start of something big? Will your EVs come to be seen like early computers with values that transcend the collector car space and appeal to the public at large? Well, this was written in 2022. I think by today we can say, yeah, that Roadster is definitely on its way to collectability. And I think once our 3 Chinese Roadsters sell, the whole Roadster visibility is going to improve exponentially.
Oh, I think it will. And, the paragraph that they had about the Roadster was spot on as well, because, most people don't really have a good sense of history as it's occurring.
Mm-hmm.
We take a look at everything from the Suzuki Samurai that I was talking about to the early car phones we talked about recently. You've got all these different things that go on, or you look at fads. You look at you look at Beanie Babies back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize history until it's too late usually, and people just look after something has passed and say, wow, I could have been part of that.
And that's probably why we don't have the foresight to buy these things before they become collectible. And, so people with vision typically will make out, or they inadvertently buy something only to realize that it's worth a fortune later on.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think the prices for the Roadster, which Haggerty said were poised to increase, are going to continue to increase as well.
Mm-hmm. Looks like YouTube. Crunch to Grace Hopper's joining us again. Welcome back. She says, or he says, yay, all caught up. Since this is a Roadster podcast, we're going to insert another Roadster item in here. If you guys can bring up the picture of the trunk solenoid. And image number 1. What we do, of course, is as we work on Roadsters, we take them apart, and we're able to find where the weaknesses are inside these cars. And one of them is a solenoid that releases the 2 trunk latches that are on the left and the right. You can't quite see them here except for the one on the left there. But the trunk solenoid is in the middle, and you can see how much weathering takes place behind this rear bumper. They have linkages here. There's a solenoid that has a plunger. There's a rubber boot. And if we go to image number 2, you can see what a typical trunk solenoid looks like after a few years of Roadster driving. And that's why these things fail. That boot is clearly cracked, kind of like the CV boot that might get cracked on your drive axle. And once it becomes cracked, a lot of that dust, dirt, and debris can go inside the plunger portion of the solenoid, no longer allowing it to reliably pull in that pin to release the trunk latches. And then, of course, you have the trunk latch linkages, which are dry as a bone here. Those need to be lubricated from time to time, but you can't do it as an owner because you can't get to it. So one of the things that we recommend in the Roadster upgrade portion of our shop is this solenoid is dirt cheap. It's picture number 3, by the way, shows the solenoid. We recommend replacing that while we have that rear bumper off, and of course lubricating the linkages, and sometimes people even replace the trunk latches. I'll tell you why replacing trunk latches might be a good idea. Years ago when I was driving my Lightning Green Roadster, I had gone to the grocery store, and you put groceries in the trunk in a Roadster because you only have 2 seats. And if you put it in the passenger seat, the stuff eventually rolls around, and and I had a watermelon, and I didn't want that coming loose on me and splitting open. So I had groceries, including ice cream and some frozen foods in the trunk. I get home, and middle of summer in Phoenix, 114 or whatever we get here, and I go click to open my trunk, and it doesn't do anything. I hear the click, but it doesn't release the latch. Now I've got all this stuff in my trunk that is perishing.
Yeah.
and had no idea at that time, we weren't repairing Roadsters yet, how to get in that trunk. So I ended up having to call somebody to come out, and of course, hours by that time had gone by.
Oh, boy.
And we finally got it open, and the ice cream was melted, and my trunk had food that was, melting in the bed of the trunk. So anyway, replacing those latches may be a good idea, especially if you put frozen food in your trunk.
Yes,
That's my
by all
lesson.
means. On Instagram, Westby has come to us and comments, says, "Good evening from the Netherlands."
Welcome.
Asks, "Do you have an update on the 3 0-mile Roadsters?"
We do, and let me go through it quickly, Westby. We'll give you the abbreviated version. We did that earlier in the show. If you go to the listing on our website, you will see that there's some updates there. The biggest update for today, though, is we have a $2 million bid for those Roadsters. At this point, they are being processed. They're going to be shipped to Dubai. That's going to take a month and a half for a number of reasons. By the way, any of you that want to revisit the talking points we had earlier, our podcasts are posted on our YouTube site under Live.
That's right.
So you can go there and see the whole story. And we probably spent 15 minutes on the discussion of the Roadsters, the 3 0-mile Roadsters. But it's a cool story. It's still evolving. There are new twists and turns all the time. And it seems like the whole world has been watching these Roadsters. In fact, one of the warehouse guys said to me, "You know that trucker that was just here, the semi-driver? He says he saw you with those 3 Roadsters. What's going on with those?" I think we're getting a lot of press and a lot of publicity. This morning, another newspaper or online magazine contacted us and for some more details.
Well, and I even saw that we had an article on a video article in Vietnamese about these 3 Roadsters.
Oh, yeah. That was actually the Vietnamese article, and I didn't mention that. That was VIN 186 that we talked about just a minute
VIN
ago.
186.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the Australian Roadster that traveled 313 miles with a couple of pilots that were into flying gliders. Yeah.
Yes. Flying
So they knew
gliders.
how to capitalize on tailwinds and how to get the maximum distance out of something. But yeah, that was Alan Woodhall's Visitor, and they actually published this in Taiwan or in Vietnam. Right.
In Vietnam, yes.
So the solenoid trunk replacement, if you want to buy one of these, you can probably Google it and find one. We have them on our e-store. There's no serious markup on it. They're dirt cheap. I think it's around $28 or something like that. But we highly recommend that if you're doing any work on your Roadster and you have that rear bumper off, change that solenoid just for good measure.
Now, I think the only thing that we have left on our news for today is talking a little more about our log files.
Mm-hmm.
In our last podcast, we talked a little bit about log files and log file analysis, and one of our listeners actually came to us and said, "Hey, I'll send you a log file if you're doing the free log file analysis." And they did. They sent it to us. We took a look at the log file. Other than the calculated amp hour capacity on the battery, it looked like a good battery, and it's an older Roadster. It's 13, 14 years old. So the calculated amp hour capacity was a little bit low. I think it was 122
Yeah.
on the
I think it was in
CAC,
there.
something like that. But other than that, everything looked good with it. But I wanted to also share, here's an example of what the log files can do for us. If you guys remember, a few months ago, we broke the story about the 2016 R80 battery packs that were starting to fail. We've been working with Tesla Engineering. We had become convinced that it was the battery pack itself that was failing due to an inductance issue. So it was a general failure of the battery pack, not a single cell going resistive. A big reason that we came to that conclusion was the log files.
Mm-hmm.
Because the log file in the Tesla Roadsters contain a wealth of information. Things like when the car gets an error, it records all of the errors. But we also get things like the temperature that 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 the ambient temperature of the car is in when it's driving, when somebody mashes on the accelerator, how fast they're going, what their odometer is. We have all this wealth of information, and we were able to see partly through the log file that when these roadsters that we call them anemic roadsters, when you mash down on the accelerator, it doesn't have the punch that you expect from a roadster.
It was an impedance problem in the cells.
Yeah. And it was the log file that was telling us that it was an impedance problem because when you put a load on the roadster, i.e., you take the accelerator and mash it down to 100% on the floor, the log file would tell us the exact moment that happened. And then there's another area of the log file that was telling us what the voltage was on a brick by brick basis of all 99 bricks. And it was showing us a fault would come up within about 2 seconds after the accelerator was mashed that was saying that there was low voltage and power was limited. And that gave us the clue to be able to then go and sit in the Roadster live, do some live testing with the computer hooked up, and get graphs of what the log file had told us. And then from there, we got the conclusive evidence that there was actually an impedance problem going on in the battery. So that's what these log files can do for us. They're so critical to us to be able to diagnose problems. And we don't even have to have the Roadster here to be able to get some of that information.
And the log files are great for predictive analysis, and that's why we suggested that if you want to avail yourself of our free log file service, feel free to just simply email us your tar file, and if you need instructions how to retrieve that from your Roadster, if you go to our website under newsletters, there's a newsletter that says how to retrieve your log file. You'll need a 4 gig memory stick and put a file out there and then just simply email it to us. This particular German customer, he had a CAC of 122, somewhere in that range, which in the overall scheme of things is lower than most. To give an example, I had a customer call me yesterday who was thinking of buying a Roadster. And he told me the CAC was 149. He says, how does that equate? I said, that's excellent, because new they're about 158 or so.
Right.
Anything close to 150 is an excellent CAC. But with the log files, we recommend that if you're going to buy a Roadster, make sure that you ask the seller for the CAC. That will tell you a lot about the condition of the battery. Again, you can send that to us, and we'll give you a read on what that's looking like.
By all means.
There are also things that happen in firmware that are logged that are not yet visible on what they call the VDS screen, vehicle display screen. That's that little 3-inch screen. So that's another reason to do a log file analysis is there may be a brewing issue that has not yet shown up on the VDS file, and it will give you early warning that something is about to go down.
Right, because anytime there's a fault, that log file will record that fault no matter what. In fact, when we did our test for the R80 battery pack, we did a Roadster that had a brand new second generation R80 pack that had been put in, 3 months ago. We had an older Roadster. These were both owned by us. It's 2 of our test mules. That had an older battery pack, and it was a first gen, a 1.5 battery pack, and we had the suspect battery pack. The new battery pack did exactly what it was supposed to do, performs superbly well. The old battery pack performed as the old battery pack we would have thought should. There was a fault a low voltage fault that appeared on that old battery pack as well. And so it was just a little tick that we're like, you know what? You can tell that this isn't a 15-year-old battery pack, because it had the same low voltage tick, but it was a self-correcting error. There was a limited voltage. Okay, so if you go around mashing down the accelerator and trying to accelerate from 0 to 60 miles an hour and you're in town streets, you might hit low voltage on this old pack. For normal driving, it'll never be a problem. But that fault was visible, even though the Roadster never would have reported anything to the driver.
Valuable tool. By the way, the Roadster log file parsing program was originally, of course, developed by Tesla, or a version of it. And then some of the early pioneers, Tom Saxton's name comes up often. He took it to the next level and developed it even further. And a couple, 3 years ago or so, my son Peter Jr. Developed it even further as well. So the version that we currently have is something that we have enhanced even beyond what the other parsing programs were doing. And we use it quite often, use it all the time. We also share it with Tesla, by the way. They at times share it with us. If there's a Roadster that would be able to be revived by us, that's an important step because they avoid a $30,000 battery replacement.
By all means. And I know that we do still on occasion use Tom's tool as well as Peter's tool. Peter's is the primary tool that we use. It gives us a little bit of extra information, but Tom has, the way his tool is developed, it has some pieces of information that are a little harder to see from Peter's tool. It's not that Peter's tool is wrong, it's just that it presents it a little differently. So Tom's is also useful.
It's one of the nice things in the Roadster community. There are a number of pioneers that were typically technical. You had to be technical in order to pay $100,000 for an electric car before anyone else did. you know?
Right.
Hey guys, that's an hour and 15 minutes. Just
All right.
letting you know.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but yeah, these early pioneers oftentimes went on to develop product for the community. Henry Sharp, for example, the originator of the CAN Junior and CAN Senior, which is an indispensable tool now that we have so many charging options. You can charge your Roadster from a J1772 type charger, from a Trident connector for the later model Teslas. And then there was Mark Webb Johnson, who was on our podcast a couple of weeks ago or so, whose team developed the OVMS system, the
Right.
upgrade version for the Tesla Roadster. And then Tom Saxton is another name that comes up often. But yeah, it was a lot of these early pioneers that helped make the Roadster viable and helped continue to support it. So our hats off to you.
Well, it looks like in closing we have a couple more comments. Stephen Rose says that we own a 2014 Model S with free charging. We just purchased a new Model S. Do you think the value of a 2014 will go up, or do you think we should just sell it?
Off the top of my head, I would say sell it. It would be quite some time with a owner population as large as Model S has before those become truly collectible. Now, that's not to say that something with a serious pedigree like our founder's VIN number 3 Model S that one of our customers is selling would fit that category. That is definitely going to be a highly collectible car, especially considering that it is mated with a Founders VIN number 3 Roadster. Same color, basic color. Those are being sold as a set. But your average 2014 Model S, it's going to be some time before those begin to take off, if ever, for that matter.
Yeah, I would think that with the number of Model S's that are out there, it's going to be unless it has some sort of special pedigree, rarity is probably the number one thing for collectability. You may be able to get a little bit more for it because of the fact that it has free supercharging. Other than that, boy, I certainly hope that you're able to sell it for a good amount.
And you know, if you really get hung up on getting another 2014 in the future, you can always buy another one. They're not that expensive currently.
Right.
Looks like Crunch to Grace Hopper is telling us the gender. Thank you. I think we've done this
you.
before, and I apologize. He said it's a he, and he's telling us where the name comes from. It's call sign Crunch at China Lake Naval Weapons Center. NWC featured in the TG Maverick.
Yeah, that's Top Gun Maverick movie. Okay.
Ahead of meeting Grace Hopper. Cool.
That's
All right.
very cool. Thank you for giving us that extra background.
We're going to have to remember that for our future shows. And then finally, George is chiming in. He says, thanks, Pete, Mark, and Jesse. Another great show. Well, on that note, I think we'll close.
I think so.
We have a very special guest for you tomorrow. It will not be a Tesla Roadster podcast. It's going to be our normal EV podcast. And we have Farzad Meshabi. Did I pronounce that correctly? I always try to put an extra character in there.
I think you got that one correct.
I think it's Mezbahi, but I'm not sure.
Mezbahi, that's it,
Mezbahi.
yes. Yep. And Farzad is a very knowledgeable EV passionate individual, worked for Tesla for a number of years in supply chain, Those of you that are in the EV space watching all the content creators, each of them have a different story. They have a different style. I enjoy Farzad's very much because he is so knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects. And tomorrow he's going to be here to entertain you, answer questions, and give us some background at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So feel free to join us.
Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, and love all the participation. That is what makes the show successful here.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Take care.